Okay, that's enough, Mary said as she walked into the room, making Daniel and his wife jump before they turned around and looked at her with their faces pale. They didn't anticipate that she was coming, but they knew that they were going to be starting against whatever she wanted, making her smirk at their confidence. Since she knew that it wouldn't last long, she was going to let them have some confidence in each other, even though she knew that she was tired of playing this game. Mary watched as Daniel and his wife looked at each other, not knowing what to say to her, even though Mary crossed her arms as she knew that she had something to say to both of them. And she knew she had to get it through their heads since she didn't want to call the police on her father, though she didn't really mind calling the police on Daniel's wife even if she was pregnant or if she was not pregnant. Mary crossed her arms and then she had an idea to give to them, though she doubted it would be easy for them to actually accept what she was really needing to say to them. Daniel stood protectively in front of his wife as he noticed that Mary was staring at his wife's pregnant stomach, though he had no idea what she was planning and he knew that he had to keep his wife safe. Mary narrowed her eyes at her father, starting to feel upset that Daniel was now coming into his wife's side, and so she no longer felt guilt about the conditions that she was about to give her father and his wife. Daniel watched Mary with a worried expression, not knowing what she was going to say, but he knew that he could not let his guard down around her since he didn't trust that she did not have their safety cross her mind. I have one final offer. Or else I'm taking things into my own hands. And trust me, you'd rather cooperate with me, Mary said, making Daniel watch her with suspicion about what her intentions were going to be, but he then noses to signal to her that she could keep going before his wife looked at him behind his back and quickly shook her head. Daniel then placed his hand on his wife's arm as if he was telling her not to worry, that he will deal with it, though Mary smirked as she knew that he was not ready to deal with what she was going to say next. She then tapped on her arm as she was willing to make them both uncomfortable before giving them news that would break their hearts, but she didn't care. Since Mary stopped caring when her stepmother made her father forget her and try to force Mary to sell her own house to them when she was gracious enough to let them live in the house. But now she knew that she had to let them know that her patience for them were fully gone and that they needed to figure out what they were going to do for their future. And she knew that she was not going to let them with about their kid because she had a plan for her half-sibling, even if it would make her father cry in agony when he accepted the terms of living in her house. Though she knew that she had to do something to let Daniel and his wife know that they were in her house and that she wasn't going to keep them in the house if they kept antagonizing her. And she knew it was becoming more of a demand than an offer, but she was becoming too desperate for peace in her home to worry about what Daniel and his wife ever thought about her, and so she knew that she needed to say something as soon as possible. Before Daniel or his wife said anything and took all of the control away from her, so she closed her eyes and took a deep breath as she knew that she had to stay confident in herself so that she could be confident in what she was going to demand from them next. I'm tired of playing this game. This is my house. I am not giving it to either of you, and until one of you can start producing that, I cannot leave. So I am giving you a chance now. Dad, you start working and pay me rent and your family rent. Or give me your child once it's born and leave. I'll rent the house to someone who will actually pay, Mary said, crossing her arms before her stepmother fell to her knees, crying hard and loud as her father stood still watching her, unable to believe what he was hearing coming out of Mary's mouth. Daniel's face paled as he realized that they had pushed her too far and knew that he had to do what he could to keep himself, his wife and his unborn come off of the streets, and so Daniel got on his knees and then folded his hands as Mary and her stepmother watched. Mary raised her eyebrow as she wondered what her father was doing, but she knew that she had to let him speak and hear what he was going to say next, though she knew that she was no longer interested. Mary then walked to her father and then got on her knees in front of him so that they were at eye level, and then she waited to see what he was going to say next, and then he looked at her with tears running down his face. And Mary could see the fear in her father's face as Daniel realized that not only had he pushed Mary too far but that he was getting close to losing her forever. Daniel knew that he needed to do what he can to make sure that he could do anything that she had asked him, since he didn't want to lose his firstborn daughter to his second wife. And Daniel knew that he was not going to let his wife push him around anymore when it came to Mary, since he knew that his wife was never going to accept Mary into their family. Don't just sit there, Daniel. Do something. You can't let that little bitch tell you what to do, Daniel's wife said before he looked over at her with fury in his eyes, since he hated when his wife would call Mary names right in front of him. He then got up and then went over to his wife and grabbed her chin so that she couldn't say anything else and pulled her face to his before he whispered something in her face. Mary raised her eyebrow as she noticed the fear growing in her stepmother's face and the tears forming in her eyes, but then she closed and shook her head. She knew that she was not willing to get involved after everything her stepmother was trying to do to separate both Mary and Daniel from the other so that Daniel would be happy with his family and Mary would be miserable without her family. Daniel then closed his eyes and took a deep breath as he knew that he had to figure out what was going to happen next, and so he turned around and then looked at Mary and opened his mouth to make another attempt at reasoning with her. But before he could say anything, Mary held up her hand because she knew the look on his face and felt upset with Daniel because it was not what she had commanded them to figure out. Daniel then nodded as he knew that they all knew what she was asking of them, and Mary smirked since she knew that she was going to get her away, one way or another. What made the encounter more entertaining to Mary was that she could see that her stepmother was getting more and more angry with the situation and knew that she was about to break and scream in Mary's face. "I will get a job. I will pay rent," Daniel said as he felt defeated before his wife immediately got up and ran to Mary and slapped her hard as Mary stepped back feeling stunned about what had happened. Daniel immediately grabbed his wife's arms, pulling her away, not knowing what to say as Mary placed her hand on the reddening cheek while her stepmother looked at her while feeling smug. A smile slowly formed on Mary's face while the smug look on her stepmother's face slowly dropped, and Daniel closed her eyes and then sighed as he knew what his wife had done. Because they all knew that Mary's stepmother just screwed herself and Daniel out of the family that they were starting, though she didn't want to believe it. Mary then turned and walked out of the room as she knew that she needed to start on some paperwork to help get things in order. Both Daniel and his wife watched as Mary left the room, but they made no effort to stop here because they knew that she had given them one last chance and Daniel's wife had messed it up for the both of them. Mary started to work on permanent custody papers so that she could take care of the child and knew that with her stepmom slapping her, Mary knew that she was not ready to be a mother. And Mary was also patient for her turn as a mother, but she knew that the happiness of the child would always come first. Even if she could admit she didn't have much maternal instincts, though she did not care, she knew that she wanted to be right about her parents not able to raise their child. "Emily, you just cost my dad his new family. And I am not sad about that," Mary whispered to herself with a smile on her face as she sent all of the paperwork that she had to a friend of hers who worked in family law. And she knew that she was not going to feel bad about what she was doing since she gave Daniel and Emily a warning and Emily still made the choice that cost them their child. Mary looked at the door as she heard a knock on the front door, and then she got up before heading to the front door, while ignoring Daniel who was trying to comfort Emily as she sobbed on the floor. Mary did not worry about feeling bad about it because she knew that it was not a consequence of her own actions but a consequence of Emily's actions, and Mary knew that she was not responsible for what Emily chose to do. Mary grabbed the door handle and opened the door and smiled as she knew that there were boxes on the porch that were for her, and so she grabbed each box and started to pull as Daniel watched her with a mix of work and disappointment. Daniel felt worried about the child's safety since Mary was still a virgin and never babysat for anyone in their old neighborhood, and disappointed by her actions since he believed that he had raised her better than how she was currently acting. Daniel got up and then started to follow her as he knew that he had to have a talk with her about what was going on with her, though he knew what was going on and just wanted to minimize the situation so he wouldn't have to lose both of his children. But Mary knew that she had already made up her mind and wouldn't let anyone, not even her father, stop her with what she was going to do next, even if it was going to tear her family apart. Mary then stopped and turned to Daniel as she knew that Daniel was following her, and they both stared at each other with Daniel not knowing what really to say to Mary and Mary not wanting to start the conversation that she knew she could end very quickly. But Mary then closed her eyes and took a deep breath as she knew that she had to get her father to stop what he was doing because she knew that she was old enough to make her own decisions and needed him to understand what she was doing. "Stop. Just stop, Dad. We both know what you're going to say. And I don't want to hear it. I gave you both a warning. It's not my fault she made the choice that she had made," Mary said as Daniel watched her while holding his hands closely to his sides as he wondered what he was going to say now that he had been caught by her. He then looked around as if he did not know what to say before Mary turned around and continued pulling the boxes to her room so she could get her room set up. Daniel took a deep breath since even though he did not like what she was going to do, He was not willing to stand around and watch her struggling. And so he bent over and grabbed one of the boxes and picked it up and started to carry it to her room, even though he knew that she wasn't watching him, even if he didn't want her to praise him for basic decency. Once Daniel pulled the last of the boxes, he stood in the doorway and watched Mary as she slowly started to put things together by herself with a sense of pride and heartbreak. He felt proud that she was not asking anyone for help, yet he felt broken-hearted with how things were going between them, and he knew that he could not blame her for what was going on. Daniel knew that Emily was the one to blame since she kept making trouble and kept starting fights between Mary and Daniel without him ever stopping Emily or pulling her to the side to have a conversation with. He watched with a saddened expression as Mary put her room together, knowing that she was going to enjoy the home while he and Emily were going to have to give up their child and their home. With only Emily to blame, since she could not keep her anger in check nor could she keep her hands to herself, and now their family was going to pay the price once the child was finally born.
Though I may not be happy with what you are doing, I am proud that you are standing up to Emily. She deserves you speaking up for what you want, Daniel said with a smile on his face, and then he watched as she looked up at him.
He was still worried about what she was going to say next, but he just wanted her to know that he was proud of her, even if it felt like they were now constantly fighting each other because of Emily's influence. Mary just nodded and went back to building her room before Daniel stood up and then walked back to Emily since he didn't know what he was supposed to do next. As the months went by, Mary kept getting the house ready for the child while Daniel was slowly building up steady income and Emily was trying to get out of giving Mary their child. Even though Mary would always find ways to get Emily to back down, she knew that she would have to fight Emily for custody of the child. But then she got an idea and a smile formed on her face as she knew what she was going to do, and so she contracted a family lawyer and then waited. The next few days came by too fast for Mary, but she knew what she had to do, and so she went and checked the mail. Mary looked in the envelope that was sent and then she smiled as she knew that it was time to make sure that Emily was not going to continue getting in Mary's way. She then walked into Emily and Daniel's room holding the envelope before Emily looked up at Mary with the envelope in her hand. Emily raised her eyebrow while holding her hand on her stomach protectively since she knew that Mary was up to something and she didn't know what. Mary walked over to Emily and then placed the packet on Emily's legs as she knew that the legs were the easiest for Emily to reach without having to bending herself up. "What is this? Sweetie, you really shouldn't here," Emily started to say as she pulled the papers out of the envelope but then froze as she read the papers. Her face paled as she recognized that the papers she was holding were papers to relinquish both Daniel's and Emily's parents' rights over the baby. He then started worrying about the future of their family since he knew that until Daniel and Emily left, things were only going to get worse and worse. Daniel sighed and then he rubbed his face as he knew that he had to figure out what Mary was planning this time. He then walked over and looked at the papers before his own face turned white, and then he grabbed the papers as Mary watched them with a smile on her face. She knew that they were getting desperate and could force it if she needed to, but knew that her father would sign the paper and make Emily sign when she was ready to kick them out on the streets. Daniel put the papers down and then went over to Mary and placed his hands on her arms as he knew that he had to beg one last time so they wouldn't lose the baby to her. Though he knew that it would be a losing battle with her because she was stubborn as him when it came to anything she set her mind to, and Mary had set her mind to getting Daniel's and Emily's child and throwing them out of her house. Mary knew that she was going to teach respect to the child as the child grew, and she would not take any disrespect from the child either since she wanted to make her own family before she met a man and had her own kids.
Please, Mary, don't do this to us. I am begging you. Emily will go to anger management. I will get a job, Daniel said as tears filled his eyes from the genuine heartbreak he was feeling from everything that Mary was doing to them.
Mary could feel the pain in Daniel's eyes, but she knew that she was not going to let Daniel sway her decision, though she knew that it was hurting her father badly. But she knew that she had to do what was right for the baby, and she did not believe that Emily would be a good parent for the baby. She looked up at Daniel as she knew that she wanted to acknowledge the pain she was putting him through, but she knew that she couldn't show that she cared for either of them. since neither of them showed that they cared for her, and so she needed to give to them what they were handing to her. Mary then stepped back as she knew that she had to be cold and heartless if she wanted to show Daniel and Emily how they had lost their way. Though Mary doubted if Emily was going to even understand what Mary was trying to tell her, but she at least knew that she could not back down, even if it meant seeing her father cry. Mary took a shaky breath as her own eyes started to fill with tears that threatened to fall, but felt her father pull her into a hug. Daniel hated seeing Mary cry but hoped that this would finally get her to back off for a little while, since she was bringing stress to Emily and the baby. Though he would never admit it, since he didn't like making others feel guilty about what they were doing, even if it would be good for the person to feel the guilt. Daniel then closed his eyes and then took a deep breath as he knew that Mary was hurting and was doing whatever she could to stop feeling like a guest in her own home. And he felt responsible for that, since he never fully had a talk with Emily to get her to stop and to force Emily to make her see that her actions were damaging his family. "I'm sorry, Dad, but I have to do this. Emily is not emotionally grown to have kids. And you need to grow a spine," Mary said before grabbing the papers and turning and walking out of the room, leaving Daniel and his wife watching her, stunned about what she had said. Daniel turned and quickly followed her, hoping he could stop her from doing what he was thinking that she was doing, but when he got to her home office door, he stopped, seeing that it was closed. He then grabbed and tried to twist the handle before his face went pale as he realized that the door was locked, and he knew what she was going to do next. Mary sat down at her desk and then she grabbed her pen and carefully copied both signatures on both lines, as she knew that she had to do it. Though she knew that she needed to do it quickly, since she could hear Daniel pounding on the door trying to get to her and stop her from taking his child as her own. But she knew that what she was doing was for the child and not herself, though she also had hoped that the child would grow to see her as their mother. Even if Daniel and Emily were to make things harder for her, Mary knew that she was not going to give up her hope to give the child a better life without anger and fighting like she had to go through. Mary looked down at her phone as she saw it starting to ring, and then she picked up her phone and accepted the call, as she knew that Daniel was not going to stop until he could talk to her. "Don't worry, Dad. I will take good care of the child," Mary said into her phone as she put the files back in the envelope and then started to type on her computer while working on now files for the case, though she knew that she needed to get baby supplies soon. Since Emily was going to be due soon, Mary knew that she had to get the nursery set up, though she knew that she had to get in the delivery room before her father could block her from doing so. Mary hung up the phone while her father was mid-plea, and then she called the hospital that Emily was going to be at and immediately got through the security questions that Emily and Daniel set up just to make sure that Mary was going to be in the room instead of Daniel. And she knew it was going to break his heart to take the child right after holding it, but Mary knew that she could not let Daniel grow a relationship between himself and the child. And she knew that it was not going to go well with her father, but at the moment, she could not care, since she knew that she believed that she was doing the right thing for the child.
"Mary, please, I am begging you, do not take this child away from me. I will do anything. Just let me have this child," Daniel begged as tears ran down his face as he tried to get the door open.
Mary then closed her eyes and shook her head sadly, as she knew that he was not taking the news well, but she also knew that it had to be done. Even if it made her a villain in her father's and Emily's eyes, and knew that she had to put the child's safety and well-being over their feelings. And she knew that she was going to do just that and worry about the child's and hope the child was going to grow up more than how Daniel and Emily were going to think about her. Mary then printed out the rest of the papers that she needed and then put them in a separate envelope before she got them ready to be shipped out, though she knew that she wanted to go shopping for baby supplies. She knew that she would have to do it at home, since Daniel and Emily would keep bothering her about taking their child, and she knew that she was tired of talking about it. Mary knew that she was going to be a better mother than Emily, and she knew that she may not find a father for the child, but she didn't care. Because all she cared about was the child's safety and making sure that the child was happy with her as their parent. "I am doing what's best for the child. One day I hope that you will see that. I love you, Dad. But you need to let me do what I need to do," Mary said as she walked past Daniel while holding both envelopes, as she knew that she needed to send them out. She then closed her eyes and then sighed as she walked out of the house and went to a nearby mail drop-off station before she opened the flap and pushed the envelopes in. Mary turned around and walked back to the house as she knew that she was ready for anything that Daniel and Emily were going to say or do to Mary. As Mary walked back home, she wondered what she was going to do next, even though she was not the one in the hot seat about her next actions since she owned the house. But she also knew that she had to have a plan ready for when she takes the child in and Daniel and Emily leave so they could have their happy ending, according to Emily. Though she started to wonder what Daniel was going to do to get back on his feet, but she knew that she had to stop distracting herself and get everything started. Mary then went back into her home office and then she started looking at baby supplies and baby clothes while Daniel sat next to Emily. Daniel placed his hand on Emily's back as tears filled Emily's eyes and ran down her face since she was worried about their child, but yet she had no idea what to do about Mary. Though she knew that Mary could retaliate and that's what neither of them wanted to happen, but yet they are stuck on what to do while Mary was also getting lab equipment for the house's basement.